The morning my quiet life turned into a full-blown war over rainwater, I walked out in a faded bathrobe, still half asleep, and found the HOA president, Monica Vale, in my driveway at 6 in the morning, swinging a crowbar at my rain barrels like she was trying to beat a confession out of them. Every hit tore another hole through the plastic, water exploding out in cold sheets that mixed with the bright orange industrial paint sheet sprayed all over them, turning my driveway into a toxic river that swirled around my bare feet, cold and slimy, smelling like chemicals and disrespect. And when she finally paused, chest heaving, crowbar still raised, paint streaked across her perfect white blazer, she looked straight up at my security camera and smiled like she'd just done the neighborhood a favor. My name is Ethan Marlowe, and 3 years earlier I really believed I'd found peace in Cedar Ridge Reserve, a rural lifestyle community in Nevada with glossy brochures about big lots, clean air, and neighbors who care. After watching my wife Lily fight cancer for 2 brutal years, hospitals and chemo and sleepless nights, the only dream that kept her going was this silly, stubborn picture of us growing vegetables for the local food bank, feeding families even when we were barely hanging on ourselves. So when she passed, I took what was left of our money and bought 2.3 acres on the edge of Cedar Ridge Reserve, land that came with old ranch water rights from 1943 and enough dirt to plant every promise I'd ever made her. I'm not a lawyer. I'm an engineer. I spent 30 years designing municipal irrigation systems across Nevada. I know how water moves, how it's stored, and more importantly, how it's regulated. So when I set up 6 custom rain barrels with filtration, overflow design, and a garden that produced over 200 pounds of vegetables a month for the food bank, I thought I was doing something right, honoring Lily, helping people, keeping to myself. But Cedar Ridge Reserve HOA didn't see it that way, especially not once Monica Vale got elected president. She was 40-something, sharp bob haircut, white luxury SUV polished like a mirror, former real estate agent from California who treated aesthetic standards like a religion, always walking the neighborhood with an iPad and a tape measure, taking pictures of people's mailboxes like they were crime scenes. And the day she came to my door with 3 neighbors behind her holding clipboards, calling themselves the Environmental Compliance Committee, I could feel the temperature in my chest start to climb. "Mr. Marlowe, we need to discuss your water situation," she said, her perfume clashing with the smell of wet soil and tomato vines, then handed me a freshly printed 47-page Water Resource Management Addendum to the Cedar Ridge Reserve HOA bylaws, pages of rules about barrel size, collection limits, and visual consistency, all supposedly passed in a special meeting announced by email, an email I never received, but somehow everyone on her side did. She took photos of every barrel, every hose, every bed of my garden, announced a $500 impact assessment and a $50 monthly monitoring fee, and calmly explained that if I didn't comply, fines could stack, liens could follow, and yes, foreclosure was an option for the good of the community. And I remember standing there, that packet heavy in my hands, thinking about my $2,400 monthly retirement, the medical bills that had eaten our savings, and the promise I'd made to Lily when she squeezed my hand and told me not to stop living just because she did. The thing Monica never counted on was that I knew water law better than she knew lipstick shades. I'd spent decades working with prior appropriation doctrine, senior water rights, reservoir systems, all the boring stuff she apparently never Googled. So after she drove off, smug smile in the rearview mirror, I went to my shed, opened an old metal box, and pulled out a dusty folder labeled Property Survey 1943. Yellowed pages, original deed language, and a legal reality that would eventually drown every plan she'd made. Her attack escalated fast. 2 days later she came back with her secret weapon, her brother-in-law, Gavin Vale, the HOA's attorney, slicked back hair, suit too shiny, cologne so thick I could taste it from my porch, carrying a stack of papers like he was serving a royal decree. "Mr. Marlowe, you're in violation of state regulations and Cedar Ridge Reserve HOA covenants," he announced, while Monica walked around my yard with a surveyor's tape and GPS unit like she was mapping a crime scene. He gave me 48 hours to drain my barrels, told me daily fines of $200 would start immediately, hinted at foreclosure to protect the community, and talked to me with that slow, patient tone people reserve for confused elderly relatives But what he didn't realize was that as he spoke, my security cameras were recording every word, every fake threat, every number he inflated to scare me. The moment they left, my mailman, Leo Ramirez, shuffled over, eyes darting like he was smuggling state secrets in his mailbag. "Ethan, she's doing this to other people too," he whispered, then told me about Helen Park, cited for excessive bird feeders, Brian Mercer, fined for parking his work truck in his own driveway, and Natalie Cruz, threatened because her kid's playset was the wrong color palette. All of them sitting on lots a developer would kill for, all of them drowning in violations. That Friday, I went to the county library, took a seat under flickering fluorescent lights, and with the help of Mrs. Bennett, a librarian who knew exactly which dusty shelves hid the good stuff, I dug through Nevada water law and case history until we confirmed what I already suspected. My 1943 water rights were senior, legally stronger than any HOA covenant. They ran with the land and couldn't be overridden by a vote at a potluck. So I filed a complaint with the Nevada Water Court, documented everything, then doubled down on cameras, motion sensors, and backups. It didn't take long. At 2 in the morning that Saturday, my phone buzzed with motion alerts, and when I pulled up the feed, there they were, Monica and Gavin, in dark clothes, flashlights sweeping over my yard, measuring my barrels again, whispering about how once fines hit 15 grand they could push foreclosure, calling me a clueless old man, completely unaware that their voices were being recorded in full HD, and that every step they took just made my case stronger. On Sunday, I called Helen Park, invited her over, and that night her kitchen turned into a war room. Papers spread across the table, her reading glasses perched low on her nose as she walked me through something I hadn't even thought about: quorum. They needed 10% of homeowners voting to make that water addendum valid, she said, tapping the numbers with her pen. They got 7. It's not just immoral, it's invalid. As Helen dissected bylaws, my cameras kept catching more: anonymous flyers calling me a water hoarder, next-door posts framing me as a danger to children, a county health inspector showing up because Monica had reported unsanitary water storage, only to check my filtration, nod, and quietly admit everything looked cleaner than municipal tap, while half the neighborhood watched like I was on trial. Then came the footage that took this from harassment to outright sabotage. At 3 in the morning, Monica slipped onto my property carrying bleach, her teenage son Kyle behind her, watching nervously as she poured it into every barrel, one after another, muttering, "We need him gone before anyone finds out about the development deal." And when we slowed the audio, you could hear it clearly: development deal, not safety, not mosquitoes, but money. That's where Natalie Cruz came in. She worked in county planning, and when she saw that clip and matched it with a pending file called Cedar Ridge Commons, everything clicked. A commercial development that needed 85% resident approval, exclusive listing contracts with Monica's struggling real estate company, and a map that just happened to overlay perfectly with the same cluster of lots being buried in violations, threatened with fines, and quietly pushed toward distress sale. While Helen filed an ethics complaint with the Nevada Bar Association against Gavin, and Leo handed over his meticulous log of every foreclosure notice he'd delivered, I went back to that 1943 folder, tracing the old survey lines and water language, and found the clause we'd missed: riparian rights to Juniper Creek upstream, and full control over flow and distribution for irrigation and flood control. Tied to my land, not the HOA. When Helen and I hiked up through the pines and first saw the dam, it didn't look like much, just an old earthen structure with 2 concrete channels and heavy steel wheels spotted with rust, but I could feel it the second I stepped onto the spillway. 2.8 million gallons of snowmelt pressing against a century-old wall, feeding the ornamental ponds, fountains, and the lakefront views Cedar Ridge Reserve had marketed so hard, all of it resting on rights that belonged to me, not to Monica, not to the HOA, not to her investors. State law was clear: dams like this required maintenance, controlled releases to prevent dangerous pressure buildup, and irrigation season was defined broadly enough that, with snowmelt high and levels rising, delaying would be negligence, not caution. So we brought in Inspector Alan Ruiz from the County Dam Safety Office, and when he finished his examination, he issued an order that made everything official. Controlled release this weekend was not optional, it was required. We did everything by the book. Helen Park filed notices with the county, Natalie crews coordinated with emergency services. Families with small kids were invited to a safety fair at the shopping center. Elderly neighbors were encouraged to spend the afternoon at the community hall. Brian Mercer brought pumps, generators, radios, and volunteers, and every piece of paper was time-stamped, and backed up in triplicate, because I knew the second the first drop of water hit Monica's party, she'd scream terrorism to anyone with a microphone. Down in the floodplain, she was busy building a fantasy: white tents, wooden dance floors, sound systems, banners for Cedar Ridge Commons, catering trucks unloading more food than our food bank saw in a month, investors from Reno drifting and wearing expensive shoes, and expectation. And when she stood in the middle of it all, rehearsing phrases like exclusive waterfront development, I watched from my kitchen window and thought, you really should have read that deed. Up at the dam, the scene was very different. The sky a hard, clear blue, the air cool and thin. Inspector Alan Ruiz with his clipboard, Helen, Brian, Natalie, and an environmental reporter named Rachel King with a camera crew already rolling. She asked me to explain what we were doing, and I told her, simply, that this was required maintenance under state law and 1943 deed rights, that it was about protecting the community from uncontrolled failure, not punishing a garden party. At exactly 3 p.m., with everyone in position and the cameras pointed at my hands, I turned the wheel, the steel groaned, the dam vibrated, and water began to rush through the channels with a deep, steady roar that I felt in my chest. Rachel's camera catching both the controlled flow and the thin silver ribbon that formed in the creek bed below, running straight towards Cedar Ridge Reserve. 15 minutes later, guests at the party heard it. A low rumble under the string quartet. Champagne conversations pausing as people looked toward the trees. Monica laughed too loudly, told them it was just the fountain system cycling, and went back to talking about high returns. But then the first stream slid into view, weaving through the grass, pooling under chair legs, soaking into the ground beneath the dance floor. 4 inches became 8, table legs started to float, cables submerged, a tower of champagne glasses tilted, shimmered, and collapsed in a spray of glass and bubbles. Caterers scrambled, musicians yanked their instruments onto chairs, and the investors began backing up, shoes darkening, suits splashed, expressions shifting from amused curiosity to something colder, sharper. Up on the hillside, behind caution tape, neighbors watched, some stunned, some quietly satisfied, while Rachel King narrated, explaining prior appropriation doctrine, senior water rights, and how an HOA bylaw doesn't outrank a state constitution. And when the water climbed to Monica's ankles, soaking her designer heels, she finally snapped, splashing uphill, hair plastered to her face, makeup streaked, Gavin panting behind her with a stack of papers already curling in the humidity. "You've destroyed everything," she screamed, voice cracking. "This is criminal. This is terrorism. We'll have you arrested, you psycho." I let her finish, then answered slowly, loud enough for every microphone. "This is mandated dam maintenance under Nevada law and the 1943 rights tied to my land," I said. "It's filed with the Nevada Water Court, cleared with the county, coordinated with emergency services, noticed to every resident in the floodplain, and signed off by Inspector Ruiz right here. You built a party in a natural flood channel you never bothered to research. That's not my terrorism. That's your negligence." When Gavin tried to shove his emergency order at Helen, she didn't even touch it, just held up the stamped county documents and the state code section, calmly explaining on camera that his paperwork had no judge's signature, no docket number, no legal weight, and Inspector Ruiz backed her up, confirming that not only was the release lawful, it was required for public safety. By the time we closed the valves after 6, the party was mud, tents sagging, speakers ruined, banners drooping, investors gone with their shoes squelching, and the myth of Monica's untouchable authority washed downstream with the last of the foam. The next few months just made it official. Gavin faced ethics charges and lost his license. Kyle's stunt at the dam turned into court-ordered community service, maintaining the very structure he'd tried to sabotage, and Monica lost both her real estate license and her position on the Cedar Ridge Reserve HOA board when 17 homeowners filed formal harassment complaints. Brian Mercer was elected the new HOA president, running on a platform of rights first, rules second. Natalie Cruz took over as secretary, making sure every vote actually met legal standards, and Helen Park turned her dining room into an informal rights clinic, helping other residents fight overreach and clean up years of quiet abuse. Meanwhile, Silver Desert State University partnered with our community to create the Lily Marlowe Water Rights Education Initiative, using our case to teach law and engineering students how ordinary people can defend themselves when paper bullies show up with clipboards and threats. These days, my garden produces over 400 pounds of vegetables a month for the food bank. Kids come up on field trips to watch the annual controlled release, their teachers explaining how water, law, and courage all flow together. And sometimes, when the sun is low and the mountains glow orange, I stand in Lily's memorial garden, hand on the ring I still wear on a chain. And I think about that day the water spoke louder than any angry speech I could have given. So now I'll throw it to you. If you were in my boots, holding those rights, watching someone like Monica try to crush your life for profit, would you have opened the gates and let the law and the floodplain do what they were always meant to do? Or do you think there's a point where defending what's yours turns into going too far?